Lalenda comedi che cimbores, andi lalenda combala and tego wores, ne cas combala gombi che comna di single wores, de comna de shimbala and tego wores, chisna de che, nieki tebache di cimbores, chisna tebi duen, de comna yamlenci rimba di shendu, andi donna congo wores, chisna di magomba ina, teje tebi comna rimba di yamlen rimba di shenba ina ya. Magombaina and Dundadi Dungasia and Tiki to the Mare is that a comedy Chimores and that Jogia di Gorshia.
Good afternoon. This morning we looked at in the text of the importance to practice. But to practice or meditate, it's imperative to have heard or listened or studied teachings. One needs to hear what it is that one is supposed to put into, what one is supposed to meditate, why one should do so, and how to do so. This is required in order to be able to cultivate it in meditation. But it is not sufficient it would be a grave error to know the stages of meditation, but not to train your mind in them. And if one were not to do so, not to cultivate what one has learnt in one's mind, one will not make progress in one's spiritual development. One will not progress towards attaining lasting happiness.
Dinigi and Tubaji Gablina, Mazo Samlo Ketana Karakura in the dinner, because Dushi took some down to Sine, Rana never debut to Sheda, and Chuson, but remember debut to Sheshe. Then Chuson Wiki, Chu Tamadi, Mengi, Dushime, Nashi, and Betizada, Tamadi, Mazu Yamsu Lemba Latine, then Mazu Tumadi Tugures, Yishiada. Dusine samlo niele de changore said Tangazu Komushi Chivi Kabla, one rogue, samlo Tantana, the Shiko Radicals that Dicasum.
Where we are in the text is in the preliminary. So this is the introduction to the actual topics of meditation. So what we are covering here is the attitude that we need to cultivate within ourselves now. We look previously at the three faults of a vessel, now we're looking at the six perfections. So this refers to an attitude or perception that one needs to cultivate within oneself. And as we saw last night, the first of these six is said to be crucial. That is recognizing oneself as a patient, or that one is ill, afflicted by the afflictions. So this, where we are now, is the introduction to the actual topics of meditation. Nevertheless, though, the presentation here we need to cultivate in our minds so as to be influenced by these perceptions.
Keva namgi de sun yore se de da de lung daya da anjige junju chimbu lung daya da du sin de lung di ba zhang ge yum chen di ro da jerim chi de ne ge nyamlen che go ba di du su che ku ge sun yo de di sun ya de nge da ga sue ne shi go ma de gyap de an de do na le du sun yore sa yi de ne sun yore an di chen ju ban ru an namgi du sun yore se de lung da an de la ya an junju yu lung da de ne ge du sin lung ma zhang ji song ge yum chen di then ge chen bu yin ba de sa yi song yore an di chen ju an ni ja ga ban zhu ne ge song yore sa ji ya de ne ge ji de ne jerim ji gorong sam zu mian zhe sang sa de ji yong si yore di ma re su ji zang nga rang ge du su nyam yo che da nga rang ge du su re an di yin bi yum chen de de song yore sa ji.
And as you will have recognized, and it's important to understand the reasons why, Lama Tsongkhapa in his text, he presents the text in paragraphs, but then these are supported by quotations in verse. So there's quite some repetition between what Lama Tsongkhapa writes in the paragraphs and the supporting verses. So what's important to recognize is why this is the case, because it is how the entire text is presented. So Lama Tsongkhapa is doing this because he's making clear that what he's presenting here isn't something he's making up. Rather, he is presenting the authentic, genuine Dharma, and therefore, and he's presenting it in this way so that we can recognize that and have confidence in what is presented and thereby apply it to ourselves. So the purpose of these quotations is for Lama Tsongkhapa to say, this is what the Buddha taught. And they're the quotations from sutras. And these are the quotations from the authentic masters, those that we can rely on, the great pandits from India. So, for example, here we see quotation from Shantideva, and we're about to come to several from sutras. So the purpose of this is for us to have confidence in what Lama Tsongkhapa is writing, because we recognize that Lama Tsongkhapa, he himself trained in this way, and he did so not based on his own unique ideas, but how all the great masters in India trained, and they trained in this way based on how Buddha Shakyamuni trained as well, and therefore taught. So please do bear that in mind, because now we're about to come to these 4 verses, and they will have the exact same meaning as what has been covered, and that will be the case throughout the text. So it's important to understand why it has been composed in this way.
Buram dundu nyewes, bushin tsam sawa tang chades, tan lasam gulwales, tato lasam guyes, dani drumyam dani, kasa dani drumyam dani jija she, chiwi duce, jiba nyangan che, tingye mayur shindu dunga gyur, mala kaiwi nyeba dida kos, she tangs. That didn't mind you share that in the Buram Dundu said in Malaya.
So first, the final sentence in this paragraph. Someone interested in sugar who only eats the husk of the cane. And then the first sutra quotation. My attainments are poor, what should I do now? This is how the childish wail while dying. Not finding the profound, they suffer greatly. These are the faults of delighting in mere words.
Buram Dundu Bushin Sawa Zamna Jadi, that Garasungurosine. Chisanganzo Ngamo Buram Ngamo Shuji said, Buram Xing Chiorwa, Xing di Sawa the Jadi, Xing Chazam Membeche, Xing du Dus, Papa Xing di Papa Buram Xing di Papa Goche said, Papa the Ngamo Yorwa, in a Ngamo Winedi. The Nanglo de Yormado, Papa de Langamone de Mangamateurs Mado, Shuchimoshe Merwada. Says Buram Ngamo de Dunduye, Anechige, Sahelia, Buram Shingi Papa de Sawata, Trade, Sawaina, and Namateurs Yunguremado, Ngamone, Rayo, Ragio Mares, or the Piededa. Trade so the Jawada, the Diginil share, Dundadre, Chazanga, Yamlin J, Damha, the Yapa, two. Duendigi di some samlo how go by there, Yamsum Malembaina, and then Donangone de Tugomar was Pedinashi, Buram Namo de Sawa Samje, Burushin Pache, Papa de Sadivena, now long Amo de Ragomar, Dundunia de Namo de Dundunia, Amo Yapu de Dundunia, near Gorte, Ine Papa de Sadidu, Namo de Ragomar. She's up. Burushingi Papa Sawa and Chiba Resorda, Burushin Sawa, some days, Burushingi Papa some said, Sawa Zamato, Nangi, Namone Ragiomar was, Dina Shiri, Turbaje, Tebe to Comtan Shimbina, Magombaina, Donda winning the Devotiki to be Dunga said, to Tugomar Essage.
This illustration continues from the previous illustration. Relating to the actor. So here the text says, someone interested in sugar who only eats the husk of the cane. So someone who yearns for a sweet taste, But instead of but yearning for the sweet taste, they have a piece of sugar cane, but they only eat the husk. Now the husk will have some trace of sweetness, but it's not what they long for. What they long for is to be found within. So too then, in our context of the Dharma, hearing the teachings is of crucial importance. But if we, despite yearning for happiness, if our endeavors to attain happiness is left merely at hearing teachings, we will not attain what we long for. So therefore, we need to hear and meditate, cultivate what we have studied.
냠뇨라시 직득 이규마라디 부르신세야 돼. 간두기 단 보여디와 랑아주 자가든 녀마 부우슈가 망보사인데 부르신 파제 제네 되는 만 속이 바 거지네 빠빠 수 비고 비제네 되는 빠빠 세고 빠빠 세고데 온두시네 산데 딩 아모로 쇼르와든 빠빠 세세 유세유 제라딘 나로게 딱 독도데 신내 세고와 아지스다 빠빠 세디가블라 부심신지 된두니에 아무 세드니 세 빠빠 세고데 용원에디 용고 말와데 됐마도 레고 말와서 베디네 베시 벨디자디로다 양어지 디 최소에디 보여야 소야다 안도시 소와즈미 데니게 손들이 벨파디네 고둠데보라시거다 아직 결혼지 지도야디 데니게 지게 메디 아직 고하고라시 영식거든요.
I imagine most of you, perhaps none of you, have I imagine none of you have experience of what is presented here. But when I was younger in India, then certainly I had this experience in that when one wanted to eat something sweet, one would cut a piece of sugar cane and then break it apart with one's teeth and remove the husk, and then there's thicker flesh underneath. And that's quite sweet, and we would enjoy that. But the real nectar of the sugar cane was to be found within the center.
Drupnyam dani jicha sida sosugi da che the dena hone an jig druba mache bache nyamlen mache bache du sla so ba ne drupnyam drubi nyamlen mache bache an do shide an jige jema an jige dak lona so kengo pacha da shise de oda tanga garche ore nyama de ne nyamlen jo ko bra de je yo mare dana jig 제게 다 제투사 말에 심비게 되는 셈태 용고를 치유 뒤지에 시로지데 갑란 지바 양한지 지바세도 지단에 보고라고라 지발 다데데 지발람나다 냠랭기 로유 냠랭기 리바 다 마게베게 지바 소소기 와서 마싱베게 될라 시고라 지발도 보고라도 곧 내수잖아 치료게 레갈레당 왜 내지 막고 신경 말고 그 지바세로 로이 부디나시 부부나신다 냠len 마제 바제 두신을 하바자 되니게는 이쪽에 방자다 랑자되게 하모고 딘 냠len 마제 바제 하바야 자고 안되니게 시리급라 셈제 용구를 해서지 양한 되네 양한 지스 대신에 양서 개버지기를 라서 디나신다 땅아지 지신 마송 냠len 제라 마송 땅아 고급대 쇼송 세베다 셈제 지기로 하다 된 양한 지에서 디세고래 니가 디다 주바냠데 지자 세데다 데니게 주베 퇴바제 되나 삼나나 나 지금 남미에 제자 주바냠레 마체바냐 냠레 야고 제 마주바이나 안내 가용 것은 시위 내가서 당아 같이 오래선 비데 셈체다 데니 교베게 되는 거래 사지 다던다 디진에 마셔바다 지바르셔야 돼.
Coming now to the first sutra quotation from the exhortation to the extraordinary attitude sutra. These now will summarize, or will represent, or present the authentic sources of what has just been presented by Lama Tsongkhapa above. So looking at the first two lines, my attainments are poor, what should I do now? That is how the childish wail while dying. So this refers then to when someone's life is nearing its end. Death is approaching and the person is aware that this life is coming to an end. And they're looking back at how they've lived their life, but with some regret. They have still trepidation about their future rebirth, and they look back at their life with regret, regretting that the remarkable opportunities that they had attained, they hadn't utilized well. So here, regret can arise in many circumstances. This refers to regret for not having cultivated the Dharma within. Someone who has heard many teachings and even has quite some good understanding of the topics of the Dharma, but they haven't given rise to them through realization, through meditation, they will encounter a deep regret at the time of death. And they are likened to the childish, because just like young children seem to have very little control over their mind, whatever arises they express, so too those who are still controlled by their afflictions, they are likened to the childish. So this person here is approaching death, and they are likened to the childish in that their afflictions still dominate them, control them. So they look back over their life with regret that they did not use their opportunity well.
gomcha dirwa nyamlen che dirwa lalen da nyamlen che shirwa jesa tingye mangyur se de nyamlen ma che ba se ro da de tingye zaiwe ge tweba che twebe dwendel ya jig nyamlen che thang ji de de she ha ko na nyamlen ma che ba ina ane jige delya da de shindu dunga gyur se de jesa 경치 뭐라고 어려 정도 체대야 고합되는 수요일이 갑라 냠는 맞아 봐이나 다되네 아는 즉 냠는 맞아 봐시도 가와리 그랬는데 당한 주기 개와 주면나 당한 손을 끼르고 봐 손을 끼어 봐나 되네 강아지마도 영하여 말아 어쩌다 동아규를 동아 연구를 해야지 대디 되네 영화도 가르쳐 버려라 말라케베 녀바디 디다고 소라 말라케베 녀바디다고 말라케베 녀바디다고 세다 제상도 개유 초라야 지게 냠는 제 마땅하지 지게 가지고 남면기가 해 계시부 자마신데 어지기 제 두스네 파 남면 손진네 아니 그 제비게다 녀발 마손에 디레스 ordinary 제가 지금 어지시 최슈과도 아다 지과도 가시와 신에서 바기시라 셰데는지 지금 고소 고영원에 냠는 마체바체 최슈와래 되네 계셨는데 너도 뒤주유리 갈이야 아는 가지고 남면 지고를 최토 만바제 현다기 거리야 시에 지금特别的从语过写的然后两个过给写的然后这大段的面把的那写着都是必须的那些俩过好吃当안에 되네 뒤수이디 갑라 냠는 맞아 니기다 녀밤 제볼 마선다 가용 거라서는 제자 시디 갑라 아디니 냠는 맞아 봐래 되네 배사선서 비 교배게 용거를 해지래다.
And the verse continues, not finding the profound, they suffer greatly. Not finding the profound refers to they haven't cultivated the meaning of the words that they have heard and understood. They haven't taken into their hands or put into practice the teachings that they have received. Therefore, the meaning or purpose of their life hasn't been accomplished. The potential of this life hasn't been fulfilled. And therefore, they suffer greatly in that they now are anxious about what future life awaits them, because they have not closed the possibility of falling to the lower realms. So they know they may well still have powerful negativities on their continuum. And then the fourth line, these are the faults of delighting in mere words. So here, they have heard many teachings and understood them, so they have knowledge. They perhaps have quite great intellectual knowledge. But that intellectual knowledge hasn't been cultivated within. And they know this, because they know their mind has not changed. It perhaps has changed a bit, but not radically. They have not closed the door to possibly falling into the lower realms. And then when they look back at their life, they see that they spent the vast majority of it lost in distraction, chatting with friends and family, talking about goings on in society, their goings on at work, family life and pressures. And in this way, their life has passed them by. And the great potential that could have been achieved has been lost. And now the opportunity is about to end.
나데니게 안주게 냠레 마제바이나 아네지 시로시디 갑리야 아네 교바게다 안두스네 냥한지야디 동아용고래 라로다 지단디 다 강사 차상나다 용마로와 다 강질레 안주게 최케레 개와치마 케레제 아네지 디바제바나 아네 개와치마가 솔리기 요하래사다 아네 동아용고래사다 개와제바이네 개와치마 안에 저기 라다미고 톱투레 데네 자네 디바용무레사데 데니게 낭비 최케레 디레 균데랑 케레 다 케레 바체 안에 데니게 이시체 안 데니게 땅안주게 직최슈 난주 최슈제 망고 슈베 난 냠레 마제 바제 누시네 요베나다 네 강사디기다 다시로치도 갑라 오다디 느껴봐야다 냥한디 용고르와다 가서 오당아디니게 지고합라딩이 제마서 뼈사샤딩이 되니게 최슈버레 제단 신고르 이내양이디 냠는 맞아봐줘 두시네 냠고 맞아줘 노주 쇼충샤다디딩아 경어슈라샤 선배기다 뼈사샤 당아디 개와 마주바 인자다 마오바디 시선데 그 진강선을 깨야게 동아녀에게 냥아여라 삼진 동아도 용고르와다 데네 레균데다 제와 치마당아지 케멜링에다 데네데 최슈슈마 데네게 삼나네 신다 동아 용마야 세데 샤라스 교바기야세 용마르와다 다데디 용하디 가르스는 최게 네수로다 이체 레균데다 최레 이체제 레균데 이체제다 안지게 게디게 되시 하고야다 안지게 최레슈 데네게 안 검잡다디에 신바체 안 되네게 다 냠네 마제발라 마타와체 라송바는 진남미에 제제 되네게도 두스네 안에 지게 라송바이나 니토라는 안쪽에 다 교바제디 요야디 용고르와다
It's not that everyone who dies who hasn't accomplished the Dharma within them will experience a regret or suffer greatly. For those who've met the Dharma and come to understand it well, but have not yet put it into practice, for them they will have such regret. When death approaches, they will have recognized the opportunity to cultivate the Dharma within them, to transform their minds, is lost for this life. They will regret that loss. And they will have fear for what lies before them, because they understand the Dharma, they understand cause and effect, they understand that rebirth is certain. They know what is virtuous and what is not virtuous. They have some understanding of the quality of their mind. Because they have some education in the Dharma, they understand the Dharma. So now, when death is approaching, and all signs of pretense are washed away, and they're looking with clarity and honesty at their mind, that's when fear and regret are likely to arise. But for those who do not accept future lives, for them, quite possibly they'll die without any regret, possibly without any fear. But just because they are lost in their own confusion, it does not mean they are not in grave danger. They had no idea, they had never actually had the opportunity in this life to learn about what is virtuous and what is non-virtuous, how to cultivate minds of virtue and abandon minds of non-virtue. They never had that opportunity. They hadn't created such causes. So therefore, they've stayed lost in confusion throughout their life. And now that death is approaching, they remain lost in confusion. So they may have no fear. But that's just a confidence that is based in confusion. So what is referenced here is particularly those who've had the opportunity to accomplish the Dharma, to transform their minds, it's specifically to them that this verse is directed.
Gala Davi Trena Duba Shik, Powo Shenji, Yendin Chebashin, Dani Nendin Number Duade, Malakebi Nevatida Kos.
Then the second summarizing verse, like someone amid the crowd watching a play who extols the virtues of another man, the hero, he is lacking with regard to his own persistence. These are the faults of delighting in mere words.
Gala Davi Trena Duba Shik, Powo Shenji, Yendin Chebashin. Jason Gala Davi is the Gary in the Garrison, Cham Shena Chapendrua. That money Nanzu Trena, Davi Trena to Demodahan. Galia, Chamta de Ma, Demo Davi Trena to Demodahan Lama Dorje, and the Adane, Gala was all that he didn't tell that did bear what that did our Tagunas, she had Yoruba Danzo, this year, Gala, Davi Trena to Bashik. The nigger demontating trainer, demontanal duration, and the Bow Shen Yu in the Chubas, Schmishandagi bear Yabuchaya, that she out or quite in the end, bear would was a query in the chair that Jiabu Dunga died in the Chubaina, Bow Shen Yu in the Chubas, or just a deep bit down, Gala, David, the nigger down this one Shasana Yamyo, but watch it in the other Yawushu Chug the bear, what told us the Yinish and the Koran to get tapped out in the Jugorva on the Demataja.
The first two lines presenting the illustration, this is something that we all have experience of from watching theatre or television or the cinema. Like someone amid the crowd or an audience watching a play who extols the virtues of another man, the hero. So this we have experience of. We just can discuss what it is that we are watching, talking about the qualities of the actor or the qualities of the character they're playing, or perhaps the plot in its entirety. So this is something that we all have experience of doing.
Yabuchagu send the conjugate Tragan Diki in the chair, Madame, Dangazo traps and the tapping Matayo Marvada. She had a bear or tongue to say, Mother, Songazo dancing Yakotayo Marva, traps and the Tayo Marva, Shingo Marva, Chizan Petina, she, Matemona, Taja, Shandaya, bear or told the Gigi to Ini to take Dennis to save that you and I, you didn't Shazang on the pa, Yawa Cheche, she or the social traps and the Tayo Matan, she had that time in your Marvas. Petina is or that Carsodium Carsocawales Tangity. Calatun. Dani Nendin number Juade, Malaki Nevatida was. Dani Nendin number Jurvades. Cesa Soso Ranagi, Tueche, Tubi, Dun, Benerva, Yamnija, Janjusen Batica, Yamlen, the Chigora, Chimbi, Yamlen, the down to the civilian, Shannon, the Chigora, said. Dine ma jike pa share da dinege jike oda de koyu dunga pombala ngejong samda ji kom ngejong samda de dame ba to be tong yu to be da to shero kom na dasen pangura dasen pa na an thaba thamji ki me thugo ra sen dinege pa jike peji di tweje donda de pa twe an twebe donda dine resen pa sheba yende dine she singyu ba na so Yamlin Bajana and Sosalia, the Yagitayo Marawasan, Dani Nendi Nyamba Jua, the Soso Ranagi, Yamlin Chigo Mares, the she Demotavana, the do said, Shavanda, or that, Com Digan, the younger Digan, the younger Tabat in the Togore said, Milu in the Togore said, and Pashi Shivaja, how was it? Yamso Malembana, Dani Nandi Rani, Beduji, and Nandi Nyamba Ju, Yamlin Machevares, Dani Nendin Nyamba Jua. Jizada, the Macheva de Garsudan of the Namia, same number that Jigge Yang Shen Chola, not been Gaso Chabi Yugi, 다 지제는 지가 총당 지게 바 참여 줘야라서 봐 되게 직도네 너나 계시 내가 계시시에 되네는 바 고고제 냠는동에 맞춰봐지 사바서 말라게 위 녀바디고 되게다 냠는동에 맞춰봐지 아니 지금 남의 온도 송질 하바이나 아니 생기인데 저바데 대시베 디단 시바레 소수길라 또바냠리가 이게요 말로 하시거든. 니가 말라게 왜 녀바디라고
Looking in these first two lines, like someone amid the crowd watching a play who extols the virtues of another man, the hero. So you can think of many illustrations here where we can see, we can be praising someone for their remarkable acting skills or their singing or their dancing. And these are skills that really inspire us and impress us. But then if we take the analogy and combine it with the third line, he's lacking with regard to his own persistence. Unlike the person that we are looking at with admiration, we have not trained ourselves, hence we lack the qualities that they have developed. We have not trained to sing like the person before us, or dance like the person before us, or act like the person before us. So therefore, all that we can do is praise their qualities, because we have not made much effort ourselves. So then to bring it to the actual illustration, this can be likened then to the praising the qualities of bodhisattvas, perhaps that we meet through biographies, or the qualities we perceive in our teachers. Praising their qualities, such as their tremendous love, their incredible compassion, their consistency and evenness in temperament through their cultivation of wisdom, their patience in no matter what challenging circumstances they encounter, what hardships they have had to endure. Praising them for these great qualities that they have developed. But those great qualities we ourselves could have developed, but we lack persistence. We haven't applied the teachings that we have had the great fortune to receive and understand, and therefore our mind has not yet changed radically. And in the final line, these are the faults of delighting in mere words. So just like with the previous verse, one has spent one's life rather than taking the Dhamma that one's heard and cultivating it within oneself, rather one has been distracted by activity, distracted by work and various dramas around work, family and one's responsibilities, and entertainment, and all these things that consume our time, in particular, consume our mental activity, rather than placing our mind on the Dhamma, not just in formal meditation, but throughout the day. And therefore, we are just like someone in an audience praising the qualities of someone else, someone who has applied themselves to develop good qualities that we admire. But we had the opportunity to do so, but we weren't persistent, and therefore we didn't achieve our potential.
Malakawe nyebare sede denigi namyingi wanto sonjine ane jike pa denigi geshe je dusu yudu kabla je ane denigi nyamsu malimbiki ane gyue am nyeba kharli gorasene sosu gyula an dunga se adan digi tubiyagi di tubtugu omare se tumbatu bade denigi nyebare se malakawe nyebase ne malakawa se adela jike 주요 삼다나로 제 니우도 말라카발람다 양식 기위 자왕 아주 냠는 제들 두수 여백qabla 되네 두수들 마다와제 전다다 ngakhyagi 쮸버 기시야다 ngakya 기시야다네 지지지 야고도 아디지 님 니즈와데 사제데 야고도 아디지 세 되네게 계시 되는 시에 남면의 총 손지 계시에 하바나 셰르바나 소수의 냠르지 두수 여바디 두수도 바쇼르와다 지산 냠르지 고브라고 말해야지다 야는 아직 말아 가와세데 소수게 냠는 마지막에 파시엘이야 아디네디네 제여 디네디네 제여선 가지 셰비네 소수게 귤라 아니 냠는 마제도 아니 지게 예 그래서 디기주야도 동아세기 돈다디 닝보도 죽투고 말해서 지나다 돈다 닝보라 그조 갈수고서는 아주기 퇴배 된들라 삼다지 디 삼다 된다디 하고디 공고야디 냠 라렌다지 공고야디 기침무시우래 해서 그러다
Meaning here is that we are being strongly urged to look at how we live our life, that the knowledge that we have acquired, how well are we integrating that? How well are we trying to integrate that within us? Because all too often one could end up in it's all too possible one could end up in the position that is presented in these two verses, where the opportunity that we have had in this life, we've wasted in distraction. We've wasted it in distraction due to pursuing things which have no value, but we ascribe great value to them. Striving for things which we think are meaningful, but actually have no real meaning. And in this life, and in this way, we end up with our life being consumed with idle speech or gossips or senseless speech, which maybe a more meaning translation would be an expression of a distracted mind, talking about things that have no meaning, but talking about them as if they actually mattered, when they really do not. And in this way, we do not achieve what is meaningful in this life. We do not put into practice the teachings that we've received. We have not transformed our mind in accordance with the teachings that we've received.
다데네 곰자고래 계침부를 냠는 라렌다고 계침부에서 계침부레와 당하는 중에 지금 원에라 동아세다 디기주야라 셈디 교화당과 셈디 교화다디 라렌다지 곰제 셈디 교화단마다 현 교화당토에 메르와 제 계침부에서 디베주베 직딘마 난젠로 시슈우제 송고르와 다디 송고르에나 곰마듬나 아니 퇴바자 퇴제 퇴베된 삼다디 근데 곰마도네 디 제네 지금 말을 판도시라 믿어왔으나 어디 말이야 제 디안 제사때 검토는데 약으로 약쇼도 차기로 와 곰마토바나 퇴바다 퇴배 되는데 삼신바다 뱀마세 판도치 뭐 편연치 뭐 사고로 받아 제사다 내니게 다디 내가블로 곰마토바이네양 퇴바다 퇴배 되는 삼나 니기 아니 고갑래도 마오바나 직견지 퇴도 곰야를 봐 둠디고 차야다요 곰에게 레라야지 차기 차야 돼 지난 퇴바데 편연 빠도매봐 직 퇴배게 퇴바다 퇴배 된들라 삼바인다 직 디니가데 편연 빠도매봐 예예바세 안 디기 편연요와 마세 편연데 아니 직 개완 빠도매봐 사고래 안 디기 마세 안디 마음바다 대디네가블랑 저기 디네 곰마도바데 마음바다 곰예고 고갑라디 디니 퇴바다 퇴배 된데 녀만에 마저고 직 냠뇨다 데로와 박샤 샤면서 곰베도 곰야래 레라와 슈지 레라 용도 볼现在 니네 퇴바다 산비기 된달이야 즉 곰마토베네 편도 빠도매 봐요 말에 진짜다 삼반에 판도 여봐지 딜라 퇴바 점나 된다데 제가 사모거네 퇴바 점 얘기가 빠도매 봐 사이그로 세상이 순기 탑라 냠레 림바템 바지 퇴바 점이 개와 빠도매 봐 사이그로 와 세상은 그지 퇴백에 편연디기 쇼시로 하자 퇴바디 드메나지레 세다 퇴바디 미나지레 세다 퇴바디 멜로나지레 세다 세상 퇴바디 빼마세 편연 침보 다 소소 퇴바 맞아 퇴바 tun데 편연 침보인데 소소게 퇴바다 디네 맞이번에 미샬이야 안초라디 년로지 초라디 봐 년가 조셔서 봐 꾸마지네 년주번에 아니 편도 빠도심해 봐요 그래서 랑기 송제 쉬야다 되는 말아 미샤다 주의데 베베지 건주 되는 게 쉬네 송주 쉬데 퇴바제 베 약보를 와서 지수이라 제반에 개와 빠도매 봐요 그래서 다 개와서야 돼 만족이 퇴백이 제 퇴배 되는데를 삼 곰마도 베네 개와 빠도매 봐요 그래서 지나 대등 안주된 인지미지 곰고래 곰먹었나 너나 주투고 말했어도 되는 게 쉬다 퇴바다 곰마도는 퇴바제와다 전삼단 시라시아 판도스 민도아선 베게 삼로 전에데 다다체고 넣어 체고 디메 말에 다지자도 공고서야 돼야 즉 예침보치는 마즉 니 퇴바다 퇴비 된삼바 곰바 디수면에 디 제시쇼래 디 인짐디 제고다 사야지 디 제반은 좀데 말 지자나도 사지고 뭐 토고 타바 토고 거 타바 토고 그래서 송여도 타바 마tum 내때는 개와신들 남공발라 판도요 말때 송고 엄라와 지자 퇴바다 공비기 귤마선 퇴바다 삼바디기 공비기 귤와데 지자 디네게 판도시 뭐여돼 여여 말에 지자 양안 저기네 공마도는다 퇴바다 삼바제데 샤라샤 여사마레세 딘데 샤샤는 깁사레선 베데 삼다 메리다.
To look at to take what we're looking at here and look at it in a little more detail, combining with what we heard previously about the importance of listening earlier in this chapter, listening or hearing or study. So there's a sequence of hearing, reflecting, and meditating. So in this sequence, then reflecting and meditating are quite different. So in English, meditation we usually take to mean the same as reflection. But in the sequence of hearing, reflecting, and meditating, meditation specifically refers to meditating with the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, and reflection then is thinking about or contemplating what it is one has heard or studied. So, which is how we usually use the word meditation. But in this sequence, it would be reflection, and meditation is with single points of concentration. So in order to achieve happiness, lasting, stable happiness, one has to radically transform one's mind. And the only way one can do this is through meditation, so actual meditation. But to be able to meditate, one has to have reflected based on what one has heard. This sequence is definite. So to repeat that, to achieve lasting, stable happiness, to attain liberation from the suffering realms of samsara, one has to transform one's mind radically. It's the only method. And to do so, one has to meditate. But for one to actually be able to meditate, that needs to come about independent on a stable foundation of extensive hearing and reflecting. So therefore, when we hear about the importance of meditation, we shouldn't then think there's no point then if one cannot meditate, so it's single points of concentration, therefore there's no point doing anything. There's a lot of benefit that will come from hearing and reflecting. And hearing and reflecting is within all our capacity, because reflecting means thinking, in particular thinking in detail. This we can and do. An extensive benefit comes from hearing and reflecting, and that was presented earlier in the chapter. There were analogies of hearing being likened to the lamp which illuminates the path for us. It's likened to a mirror which illuminates our own mind, etc. So even if in this life we cannot engage in actual meditation, so that's with single points of concentration, if we do study or hear and reflect well, we will accumulate powerful imprints, which means later in future lives we will be able to much more easily have that foundation that's required to be able then to engage in actual meditation, and thereby bringing liberation so much closer. So if you find yourself in a position in this life where you say, realistically, I don't think I will be able to meditate with single points of concentration in this life, take heart. Hear and reflect. Think deeply about what the teachings you are receiving. And in this way, you accumulate vast stores of merit and deep imprints. And this will help you immensely in future lives.
Yasa Teba dan, Samba dan, Gomba Sumdi Gechewa Kagiri esne. Gomba di Gechewa re, Teba dan, Samba Nijine, Gomba di Gechewa re, Lap Tuya Yomare. Adi Samba di Gomba dan, Teba Nijine, Samba di Gechewa re, Diyan Lap Tuya Yomare. Gomba dan, Samba Nijine, Teba di Gechewa re, Diyan Lap Tuya Yomare. Kasan Gansa Susu Rana la, Dangbo Nga Zu Chue Ma Tungen Gansa, Jidelia, Teba Mong Mekendile, 퇴바디 개체와래. 그래서 퇴바 제가 퇴바 개체와래. 될 공부할래 퇴바디 개체와 제거. 제가 뭐 퇴고 그래. 마 퇴바이나 네 삼다요 말. 삼마다는 공부하면 제가 퇴바디 빼기 내 당보와랑 저기 지 당보 퇴디 취년디 개체 무시고 그래지. 퇴 차외 제라 퇴바 몽보 제 차외 제라 네가를 개체래서 공부할래 삼다야디 개체 버려지. 다 퇴비 된들 삼다. 그래서 퇴바 몽고 퇴사완자다 퇴바들 제라 마진나 디디워로 제거라. 제가 다 가르고선 퇴비 된들 삼내 야내야도 다 된다들 삼다 개체 버려지. 다 퇴바 제샤 삼바 된다야 삼차 디니게 니스 하고도 다 가르 개체 뭐 차선 퇴바다 삼바디 개체 뭐 제가 먹고 고려로 하고 살로 하고는 그 장과 개체 뭐 제가 뭐 진짜 퇴바다 삼바디 개체 뭐 말에 디나다 고메디 개체레스 대시 퇴바다 삼바니디 조사디 냠뇽을 마선데 디네타데 신고르다 곰바디 곰치네 냠뇽 깨디 개체 뭐레스 진짜 디네 인자 가살 가서 레당보라 다다고 퇴디 개체 뭐지 퇴비기 데 바라들 되네 삼다의 개체 보제 디숨다의 개체 삼다 다 퇴바다 삼바니가 조세외 제라 는 고메의 개체 보레서 대자 개체 뭐 숨과 개체 뭐를 가사 소술을 때네 개체와 차용을 마도 가사 찍을 숨과 디 개체와 디 개체 샤에 매르와다 제가 가사 소술 때 내래당보다 당보 퇴바지의 개체 제가 저기 곰바타살 페시타디 갑리아 곰자루에서 이제 저라 디켈린 지금 말해 다뭐 엘리 당보 다시 페시타쇼스 다당보 페시타 거래서 그래 제자데 페시타선 제마 도쇼 그래서 그래 제자 디네자 곧 당보 퇴바의 개체 뭐를 마퇴바는 돈나삼다시 말 돈나삼마다시나 곰자요 말 제자 당보 퇴바 개체 뭐 퇴배 된다라 삼야다의 배 개체 뭐 디니가 조세외 제라 되는 냠는 제고를 해서 다디디 손에 디스월다 퇴바다 삼바디기 조선 디 냠는 맞는데 퇴바다 삼바집에 된다 가르친 지고로선 곰자게 된다 지고 섬고로 봐 제바로 와서 제자데 곰자고를 해서 디송고를 다디디 퇴바다 삼비게 된이도 조세겐디게라 다 곰자디 계침을 해서 다디디 송고를 마도 지단에다 퇴바다 삼바디 곰자 계치를 곰마게바나 퇴바다 삼바제디 판도스가요마 제고요 말서 디송고 말다 된다라 제자디 양지 고노 마테와라 계침을
Let's talk a little further about hearing, reflecting, and meditating. If you ask yourself, which is the most important? We've heard meditation is very important. Without meditation, one cannot achieve a liberation or enlightenment. One cannot radically transform one's mind. So that would make one think, well, meditation must be most important. But then we've also heard that in order to meditate, one needs to have reflected. And in order to reflect, one needs to hear. This actually comes to show that you cannot point to any of these three and say, this is the most important one, because they are interdependent. All three are needed. The latter is built in dependence on the former, and it is necessarily so. Moreover, depending on the individual and the imprints that they have accumulated in past lives, more effort is required in certain of the stages than in others. So for those, for example, who have strong imprints of hearing and reflecting and or meditation on a particular topic, and they bring those imprints into this life on that topic, then they need to hear less. And the reflection will quickly bear results, and they will be able to meditate on that topic much more easily. And either that same person or other people, that's either that same person but on a different topic, or other people who don't have such imprints, they will need to put on much more effort for a greater period in the process of hearing and reflecting in order to develop the quality of understanding and integration before they later can come to meditate on that topic. So what one sees there is this deep interconnection between hearing, reflecting, and meditating, that each stage is required, but depending on the imprints one has, one may need to spend a lot more time on hearing, a lot more time on hearing and reflecting, or can readily or comparatively go more quickly to meditating on a particular topic. And then moreover, in the monastery, in Sera, our teachers encouraged us, now that you have the opportunity to study, you study. And you, of course, you reflect, you think about the meaning of what you're studying. Later, when your studies are complete, then you can focus on meditation. So in other words, utilize the opportunity you have, cultivate the imprints as deeply as possible. And here, though, the meaning that we need to get from all of this is this deep interdependent relationship between the three. That now, as you're receiving teachings, hear them, study them, in order to later meditate on them. And when you do your reflection on them, either both here in the class and at home, reflecting on what you're hearing, do so with the motivation to later be able to meditate single-pointedly on it. So that as you cultivate your imprints, the objective is always clear, that I'm hearing so that I can reflect, and I'm reflecting so that I can later meditate. So understand that clear sequence and the interdependent relationship between the three.
Siza diji kisinyama shebale töba chede be geçimure şerwa. Siza diniga niga geçimure sonyodu. Siza töba chede geçimure sede kisin da le dangbo tödi geçimure sachi. Da dine töne dönde samdane 사회제라 고미야디 계치모래 해서 다들이 다 tö바제 tö베 dön데 sam찬에 dine 고미야디 계치모래 냠솔라야디 냠렌치야디 계치모래 해서 손에 디슨 거르바다디네.
So earlier in this chapter we heard that hearing is so important. Now in this part of the chapter it's saying meditation is so important. So how these two sit together in harmony is to understand the sequence I've just presented. That one hears and reflects in order to meditate. And one can then meditate independent on the hearing and reflecting that one has done. So depending where one is as a practitioner, one's emphasis will initially be on hearing and reflecting, and later be on meditation.
다 냠는제다 다 dinma 냠는제도 안다봉아도 기부 충고도 투모알람 이름바 냠는제도 계신보레서 디시그로와다 다디서 디저 되는 기부 중기 람 투모알람 이름바 냠는제도 배 계신보레서 디레 계셔 다디서 제가 가져오래 태바침배 냠는제도 배 계신보레서요로와다 상계마도 봐도 계신보냐야 다지 상계고 톱선 된 차례다 거기에 좀매 차르마도 제가 그래서는 다 나도 기부 중요 람 이름바데 장도로 맞으냐라 다 디디 장호도 계침보러 와 마도 딜에 채와지 장 두에 매러 장도죠 다디 장차외 기부 중원다 람 투모 람 이름에 장차나 또고 가가점 뒤지고 장도 채사는 다디 계침보 채고 장도 냠용으로 싸사러 와 다기부 중요 투모만 람 이름바 투모 람 이름바 다 싸와 이제 디한 계침보래서 계침보자 다디 냠용 싸지 그 갈라가도 오스 차서지라 다기부 중요 람 투모 람 이름바 다기부 중요 투모 람 이름바 이디 오스 차서버시나 다 디니고네 갈라가서 냠냠 찾아봤다 다 그래 사바디 태바침비 람지 기부 침비 람 이름 버자데 계침부 차들어와 그 뉴버에 차르자 제가 되네 람냠 이름베나네 자주스미 꿀레 나데 파신 중에 냠내냐 제디 계체라지 두신의 계침 뭐자 단 계침 상지디 냠 자주스미 냠내 제데 타만 상지고마 토야데 계침부를 해야지 진짜 상지고마 토에 차는 디 돈담 미유조도 줍차르다 되는 거 계침 뭐가 차상 라서로다 딜레만 마도 상지고마 마도 봐도 계침 뭐 짱야 제거 ordin 마
You've received many teachings on the Lamrim before. So you would have heard so many times it presented that this topic is so important. Just like we're hearing here, meditation is so important. And a few weeks ago we were hearing is so important. And you'll know from the teachings you receive, as we progress through the various topics, each one is presented as being absolutely crucial. So when one comes to the trainings, when we come to the actual practices, when we come to the trainings shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, we will hear that the training in death and impermanence is indispensable. Then we'll hear that refuge is so important, and then we'll hear that cause and effect is also indispensable. Then we'll move on to the trainings shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and we'll hear how these are so important. And then we'll get to the practices which are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity, and we'll hear that these are supremely important. So every step of the way, we hear how important that particular training is. Now, the way to understand this is that in order to achieve Buddhahood, every single training is of crucial importance. It's only when Buddhahood has been achieved that all the important stages have been accomplished. But until then, everyone is important. But the way then for you personally to relate to this is what is most important is for you to train where you are. That is where you need to focus your emphasis on. And as you accomplish that, you're ready for the next step. Just like we're hearing here in the 3, hearing, reflecting, and meditating. In order to meditate, one needs to have reflected well on what one has heard. So therefore one hears and reflects intensely to be able to meditate. So too, with the stages of training, one starts where one is. And in dependence on the imprints that one has, that will take some time or go quite quickly. But we need to, whilst each step is important, we need to train in the correct sequence. Then our training will go well.
Buram Shinshin Ningbo Jiames, Buram Shinshin Ningbo Jiames, Gabar Chevi Rone Nana Duk, Shimba Sebe Mini, Buram Ro, Shimbo Never Nuba, Maino, Jidere Shunba Deshin Mawade, Roda Bonin, and Dila Duensem Yin, Deda Vena, Mala Gaponte, Dado Bayujela, Duensum Shi Che Song Sosa.
Now coming to the next 2 verses, and I'm just going to change the translation of the second line in the second verse. The husk of sugarcane has no essence, the delightful flavor is inside. Someone eating the husk is unable to find the delicious flavor of molasses. Similarly, words are like the husk. The taste is in contemplating the meaning. Consequently, stop delighting in words. Always be conscientious. Reflect on their meaning.
Deji Sheba Naje, Buram Shing Shun Nibu Jiame, Sededa, Buram Shingi Baba di Jigpa Shunba Sid Baba Segura, Buram Shingi Baba di Pa 7, Namo Dusur de Namo Ningbo di Rayo Marese, Jizan Ningbu Jiame, Gawar Chevi Rone Dana, Nana Dux, Manzu Koheg, Chimbu Shotus, Kabuja Sag, Romone, the Papagin Buramishing Nano de Liores, Chisan Disago or Esor, Chisan Buramishing Papa, Chisawa, Samji, Namadus, or the mother Buram Nami, running body Noyo Mares, running body Kawas and answer, Kabujan Sag, Kawaki, running body Kawasan, the Nana Yores. Buramshing in Antelor, just a Buramshiki, Sing when it now with now not a Sago or S, Sigurta Pedirwa.
Looking at the first verse and the first 2 lines, the husk of sugarcane has no essence, the delightful flavor is inside. This is just like how we started this session. The sweet, while some slight sweet taste can be found in the husk, what we long for is to be found within. Likewise, to take the very essence of the sugarcane, to take the very essence of this life, we need to look at we need to turn to what is within.
Then, Jidarish Gasore, Shimba Sebe, Mini, Buram Ro, Shimbo never Nuba Maino. Chesna Buram Shingi Baba. Baba Papi, Saturn Della, Namo chooses the Roshimbo near Marayo Mares, Sine Rayures or Zayo Mares, Shimbo never knew Mainosi. Diga the 7 Shimbo never near Ratu Mares.
And that verse concludes, someone eating the husk is unable to find the delicious flavor of molasses. So if one just eats the husk, one is going to be disappointed. One will not achieve what one desires, the sweet taste of sugar.
that Petiche, that Duan Tishore, Shin Shun, Jidere Shunba, Dishin Ma Gasara, Jidere Shunba, Dishin Mawate, Roni Dilla, Rodabuni Dilla, Duensim Yinsir. Jezadang Jugi Buramishingi Chikpa side, Roda Gamma, Tus, Nungor, the Duningbo Gamodi in Yurua, Raya Maraba. Dinashi, Betinashi, Nushimba Savanashi, Nazuki, Yamlenji, Rimba de Tuba, Tubigita, Dushe, the Didesaka, Tubarachet, Tubitunda, sometime the Vinam, sometime in a Gomebana, and the Ningbo, Yamlin, Ningbo, Gomebana, Chita, Nazuki, Digi, Dunha Seata, Digi, Druba, Digi, when it is Junior Maresca, so come Yamlen, Nyomo, but Papango or Segura, say the Digi when it Lugura, Chita di Leo Maresore. Shin de Shimawa de running dilla, doing sim in city, running, wrong the garrison, that don't only the run Nashi, Buram Grone, Nashi the garrison, Duelia, Gomja, don't have some Gomia the answer, don't say answer. The Shima de run, Tanga the Shima de said, I think I did to church the shoe in the made in the chick shoe, new shoe in said, she, don't have some mother and Marsheva, or the share. And share your batch made in the shoe, didn't get pie, share that didn't share in it. Donda Yamsulin Yamlin Jemena, and then did you do your union and do your mare? Says that Dunga said to go mares. Says that the union do your Dunga said the Donda Nibocomia dies. Roda Bonet said that doing you. The union did that, Ramone Nashin dear Yam digi one did, don't let somebody rest to some comedies or combine the Yungure session. That is it, and that is in Yamasheva, that's just a cheaper that is such.
The first verse here presented the illustration, and now we come to the meaning. So looking at the next verse, just the first two lines. Similarly, words are like the husk, the taste is in contemplating the meaning. So here we're being encouraged to hear and to reflect on the meaning so that we can come to meditate on the meaning of the words. It's not sufficient merely to hear or to study. We need to think about the meaning, reflect on it, contemplate it deeply, so that we can later meditate well on the Dharma. Because in the same way, someone who's eating sugarcane does so because they desire a sweet taste. The reason why we receive teachings or read Dharma books is because we want happiness. We want to transform our mind and attain a state of lasting happiness. That cannot be attained if one only listens to the teachings. One has to listen and reflect so that one then can later meditate. Because it's through meditation, which is what single-pointed concentration, that one will be able to completely overcome suffering and attain lasting happiness. We need to put into practice the words that we hear. And the way to do so is to study and reflect so as to be able to meditate.
Baba go sa ho de ye xin bo re baba mo ga ju du ji pa kan na ba ju sa ne ka la ma xue da de ne ji so jie ya cha hu ni zhuo de nyong mo de ya ni ji ka la ma xue ye nian a yo ba ji de ne zhen ye le baba de pa xu ni baba xu de baba ge nga mo de ye de baba de nga mo yu de yu xia ba na yong lo ba de yan sa de ne baba de bi xian de baba nga mo sa se xue la de nang ge ga wo xiu lo ba ji sa ba ne de ne xi ni bu yo ni bu che an ka la ma xu ma lo dum de bo sa jiao lo ba an di na xi de da ko dang bo tue ba che tue bi de de la sam da ne de ne gom jie de le la yo ji da bu ren xing baba ma bu ne ne de ka lu ju ba ne suo jie ya ga le ha bo cha bu an ka la ma xue na zi da ni ga yo ji da tue ba da san bi me na gom jie de ya yo ma lo di na xi da baba bi ba ne baba de bi bu ren xing baba bi baba de sa de ne an ji ge nang lo de sa ba na di na xin tue ba che tue bi de la sam da de ne gom jie ba na da di ji de yo ba da go ya di ro ba.
So just like someone who wants to enjoy something sweet, if they have a piece of sugar cane and they just start munching on the outside, then they're going to take no pleasure in that. The outer skin is very rough, so it needs to be cut, and then there's softer flesh inside, and that is quite tasty. There's some sweet. But if they go deeper, right into the very essence of the sugarcane. That is where the thick, delicious, sweet taste is to be found. So this is the approach we need to take to the Dharma. It's imperative we hear teachings, we study, and whilst doing so engage in extensive reflection. And engage in these two together, hearing and reflecting, but always with the understanding that we are doing so that we can meditate and thereby deeply integrate the Dharma within us and thereby transform our mind. In that way, we'll get the very taste, the very essence of the Dharma. So we need to engage in this entire sequence of hearing, reflecting, and meditating. That is how we will achieve our desired goal.
Then in Deda we na mala ka bon te ta do ba yu che la dun som shi si de che sa de ne za thwe ba che thwe be dun de la sam da ne de ne ba ma ju gi ji sam di chai ye che la an ji ge be ne nga kya so da sim nam yen ge cho la ma da wa che an ji ge cha da ge ge yu cho so ji ji xie de cha da ge guo xie da de ne sam lo da de cha da ge wo di cho so ma da wa che de le an ba yu ding go de si de da Deda we na mala ka bon de denigi cha da ge ge yu cho la sem de ge pa ma da che an de le di go ge xie de ba zam xia ba yu ding go de da do ba yu ding go de是这样ba yu ding是的 sem denigi cha da ge yu cho la ma da wa di go le ge xie da de ba zam xia che du ju de ka la de ba yu jue la dun som shi se de ne dan da le sam da ko me de ge chi mo le de ko mo go le sa ji
The first two lines in the verse then present the meaning of the previous verse. Similarly, words are like the husk. The taste is in contemplating the meaning. The next two lines then in this verse, they present meditation advice. Consequently, stop delighting in words. Always be conscientious. Reflect on their meaning. Here we are being encouraged not to merely hear, but to hear and reflect in order to meditate. And how to do so? One needs to overcome a distracted mind. And what we are distracted to are objects that we desire or objects that we wish to repel. So what we attach to, what we are averse to. So this is what distracts us. So when we're trying to contemplate virtue, our mind is drawn to other objects, either things that we long for, we desire, or things we want to repel. We need to restrain our mind using conscientiousness, bring our mind back to the object that we're trying to meditate on, cultivate the mind of virtue. So conscientiousness is the mental factor, the consciousness that we use not to follow our thoughts of attachment or our thoughts of aversion, but to rather stay with virtue. So in particular, the virtuous, particular virtuous object that we are trying to meditate on.
가르치는 거 강가 요새는 안 줄래 너무 두숨기 디왕기 거래 생각도 삼로나야 대치 되자게야 콘도게야 안지 미시베 모바 마리바 마시베 되게 삼로시 삼로디서 요래스 제산 딩한도 차상다 동아기 유로도 자와 내라 마선 디레스 난 디메바 쇠고 거래 지래 다디 메바 쇠발라 안에 디 되자이나 콘도이나 디징이 뭐 대나 지난 되샤세 되게 뭔가래 이거 유도고 말고 유를 모든 거 로셰 차대로 콘도세의 유도 하고 그거 뭔가로 유도 그런 거 되는 거 있는데 한 뭐가지 노트지 삼다도 그러와 진짜 되니게 뭔가 말이 봐시더라 나 가야 마시도 삼다 마신 바데 진짜 디메바 쓰고 그랬어 디메바 쓰발라 아니 가르치고 가는 메바 쓰고 그랬으네 삼로 따지 메바 쓰는 마도시 아니 이게 치료기 면주지야다 되니게 토네 가야 메바스 뒤에 메바로 와 지난 삼로다 디하는 소수규를 여버도 소소라랑 삼다서 마도 순지 소수규를 여버도 미션다지게 삼다지 나중에 기념 못 받도 뭐 말이 받도 세트야 메바로 와 지난다 나서 삼로디 마신 바디 신바스야다 노주 여버도 메바스야디 아주 삼라탄 메바스 고고래 제로다 디메바 제장 아주리 네디 네 녀모독스 메바스 고래 디 메바스 발라 안다 가르고거선 당보 삼라탄다데 신고고와 제사디 삼다 당보 퇴고고래 세데 퇴바디 베 당보 마퇴바 퇴바디 계시모 휴레 퇴제네 디네디네 제고래 디네디네 제고래 디 되차이나 님보 가르진 고래스는 두스팅고로 콘도에 님보로 잠바도 공고고래 사다 단 모바 마릭바제 디 님보다 다음에 바또 베셰랍 두스 공고래 제 고고래스데 데네바 퇴네 퇴바디 베마제 계시모레스 세상 퇴베 된들다 퇴네 삼마다 샤신 람산 제루로 봐 세상 퇴되네 어당보 디삼동 이바 디삼동 삼당나 데네로 딘두 신파 야네 마셰셰교데 송셰교데 야네 양도 야네 양 삼당데 땅이 되니 고림다 냠는지다 림바디 신용우레스 디신세외 제라 한 가르소네다 공고에 계시모레스지 네 나니 뭐 공고에 계시모레스 디제바이나 아주 녀모 독숨 네 녀모 독숨디 대신 아주 네바다 버레스 두셰게 네디 파세 투레스 네 네세 제자 면세제 면 담가디 파 냠술레 데네 네 네든 세게 네 면세 네바세와 나시 냠술렘 발레 데네 아주 네디 마 세투그레 탈바 톱투그레 세지 너네디 숨어라다 좀 저어라 나 인보 디레다 아주 계신 수쉬에디.
To summarize then what we've been looking at is that all the suffering that we experience comes from our afflicted minds, in particular the three poisons of ignorance, attachment and aversion. These are the roots from which all our suffering arises. Therefore, they are what needs to be eliminated. And the ignorance there are different words for ignorance. So the one here that's used here we can understand better as a confused ignorance, because it's the ignorance that comes from not knowing. So how does one overcome an ignorance where one is ignorant about how things are, and ignorance of not knowing? One needs to gather knowledge. One needs to gather knowledge and integrate that knowledge. That's how one comes to know something. This we have to recognize, because all too often this is not the approach we take. When we experience problems, we immediately project outwards. If only my circumstances were different, if only the people around me would change. This is not how we will attain lasting happiness. We have to look within and recognize that we are still guided by this confused ignorance. We may have heard many words, but we're still blaming outside of us rather than blaming our own afflictions. So therefore we need to put the focus on developing our minds. So as to overcome this ignorance or confusion, we need to hear and reflect so as to change our way of thinking. The very first step then is hearing and reflecting. The hearing teachings, reading texts, or the hearing, listening, studying. This done together with reflecting on the meaning. And here the two need to be done together, because if one just gathers knowledge, that's all one is doing, gathering knowledge. It's not going to have an impact on your way of thinking. One has to reflect. Moreover, it's through reflection that one is less likely to forget what one has learned, and through reflection on what one has been hearing, much more likely that one can apply what you have been hearing in daily life, live by the teachings you are receiving. So therefore, hearing and reflecting, this is crucial, because then we will come to we'll come to understand what we are hearing, what we are being taught. We won't forget it, and it will start to have an impact on our lived experience. And this process of hearing and reflecting should be done in the context or done with the understanding of the aspiration to hear and reflect to the point where we are ready to meditate on that topic. So to meditate with single-pointed concentration on the topic, with the understanding that it is meditation based on extensive hearing and reflecting that will bring about the radical transformation that we long for. This transformation that will lead to a severe weakening and eventual eradication of the three poisons and the attainment of liberation. So that in brief is what we've been looking at.
dine zada ngā zuki dine nyingbo di ngā zuki da tue baji tue bi dine nyamlin che wara songwa yin zada ngā zuki jiki dosi ne da nam yu ngā zuki jiki nime chili ya samdangwe ne da kunho le ya da janshu semji kunye langwe ne semjian tamji yu dina sangyo kubang tobar shuwa sempige di dina la tobi chirdu ngay diri lunga yisum yu kone shen la nubigi jawa kasur da nga zuki shen semjian tamche dewa da dewa tengu du dunga dan jawa da korwe dunga de le da matar da tabidu wa da rang na shen semjian tamche korwe dunga le zhogu de digi gugu du semjian tamche dewa de dena semjian samla da dine semjian de dunga dan jawa shuwa semjian samla da dine semjian de dunga dan jawa dan digi de tenpa de ngay jigi semjian tamche sangye sala ngay duko tuba jigi yin semjian lasan de samda dine samda de da de zangye semjian tamche ki tu sangye kubo ma todun da semjian liya semjian tamche penpa gyachimbo chuk tusa ma re jeza da sangye kubo tobna penpa gyachimbo chuk tuku de de zangye semjian sangye kubo tobo shuwa semjian da samda jiki janshu semjian jik nga tu samda jik da dine 다전 심장의 상유고바 토비 치르도 딩이 류 롱주에 계속 지바 탐 제시 심지 탐제라 당기 셈비게다 두신의 삼는데 공고미야들의 당한적이 두신의 다 동회 셈바 고미야들 곰디 곰 안데 데네 먼저 류가 유순 요건에 현래 뇌배자와 체배자와 사야 자와의 지금의 셈비게다 두신의 삼다야다 안데네 안데 디체 삼다야제라 다 현기 뇌바당 지디니게 직 차와라 같이 하면은 팔이야 렌리야 콘로 말랑바지 안델이야 잠바다 제비기 인지 검토바 지긴 선배 섬다를 수비냠나 자고래 디네 자다 현기 된다리야 판도주야당 안데 지 최냠내 지발이야 륜알이야 지 강아 같이 채베네 강아들라 마셈바지 냠내 지긴 선배 섬다데 데고 수비냠내 안디나시 데니기 냠는 지야벌야다 빼에 무드니 지기나 게디나다 디네 지야라 빼 약보래 대성에 무드니 지도바 지긴 선배 삼다마나 전주기 냠는 책으로 봐 두시는 아주 삼다에 계시모래 안디네 자다 띵이 냠는 디네 아주게다 대실이야 직 잠니제 자주 셈 고미야다 지메임지도 제지도 삼다지 되베갑라네 고 제지 내바 띵이 냠는 두고 냠는 두고래 다 디네게 냠는 진데라 아주 지게 셰르비 삼다면나 다 되네게 최 되네시나 간네시나 랑라 나와 나신지 다신 집에서나 가야냐메 동상지마 도미 아선베게 다네 간시요레시네 최 탐지 간시네 개와다 디바다 지기 조와 심전 현나랑다 현세디 파는 현지를 파류파 다바 점이 여바시리 세베 두시 삼다네 셰르비 냠나로 차르고 되네게 가서 삼래 안에 야도 다이디 데네게 따투야디다 마주게 라렌다세디 데네게 제투바나 마주 제베나다 마주 라렌다고 와다 마뉴르 마도 뒤sit 링론을 매베기다 안 데네게 또 되서 제투바나 가서 라렌디 공부하데 차고로 와다
You can start your meditation putting into practice the teachings that you hear by reminding yourself that it's the afflictions that cause all my pain and misery. Since beginningless time, it's the afflictions that hurt me and cause me to accumulate further causes of suffering when expressed, bring suffering into the lives of others. I need to gain freedom from these afflictions. But it's not only me who's suffering from these afflictions. So too are all other mother sentient beings. So here then one can reflect that in the same way that I want to be freed from the suffering of the affliction, so too do all beings. May all beings, and this expression all beings includes oneself, may all beings be freed from their afflictions. Here one can imagine beings abiding, freed of their afflictions, no longer responding in afflicted ways. And in this way one generates compassion for all beings. Likewise one generates a thought, may all beings abide in lasting happiness, only generate causes for happiness. May beings, in other words, may beings only abide with minds of virtue. Here one generates love for all beings. So included within this is oneself as well, oneself amongst all beings, being freed of the afflictions, abiding only with virtuous minds. And one can cultivate this thought further, recognizing that right now this is just an aspiration, but I want this to become the lived reality of every being. To bring this about, I have to become a Buddha. So therefore I will strive to become a Buddha so that I can guide all beings, and again, including ourselves, to attain a state freed of the afflictions where one abides in lasting happiness only with minds of virtue. This way bodhicitta is generated. Then perhaps here you can insert a reflection that to actually achieve enlightenment, I need to focus on what's important. And I'll do that now in this meditation, but I will do so throughout my day. Watch my mind, use mindfulness and introspection to take care of my mind, not to be drawn towards meaningless activities, but to always keep my mind virtuous. And then one can reflect on ethics, develop the determination that if I am to develop myself to the state of Buddhahood, I have to ensure that my mind is subdued, restrained from coming under the influence of the afflictions. Because that's the purpose of my training, is to abandon the afflictions. So the cultivation of ethics is that of subduing the mind or restraining the mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions, and thereby refraining from acting or speaking in an afflicted manner or motivated by the afflictions. Thereafter one can reflect on generosity, the wish to give of oneself to others, to help others in whatever way one can, and in particular the generosity that will later come through one developing oneself spiritually to later be able to give the Dharma to others. And next, one reflects on patience. So patience has, as its prerequisites or its foundation, love, compassion, and wisdom. For one to practice patience well, the mind that stays undisturbed in the face of adversity, one needs to have love, compassion, and wisdom. So here one can once again cultivate love and compassion, thinking of situations that one either recently encountered or may encounter that day, where one's patience will be required, and role play that situation. If it's a past situation, how could I have done it better? Or a future situation, how can I be sure to be skillful? So that one acts with an attitude of love towards others, compassion towards others, wisdom in the circumstance. So in this way, one develops the mind of patience. And as part of that, because patience isn't only reflected to outer circumstances, but also to our own inner turmoil. So when our own afflictions arise, or inner distraction arises, patience there is where one's mind does not become overwhelmed by the arisal of one's own afflictions, but one gently returns to a virtuous way of thinking and is not swayed by the arisal of the afflictions. The next meditation is that of joyous perseverance, where one rejoices in one's meditations, rejoices in one's accomplishments, where one has seen one apply the Dharma, rejoices in the good qualities of others, and in this way delight in one's spiritual development. This serves to spur one on to continue, both now in meditation and later again between meditation. Then that of a single point of concentration. So for us, the best way to cultivate this here is to not to focus on developing calm abiding, but in each and every preceding step, as well as the final step that will follow afterwards, as we are meditating and a virtuous mind arises within us, perhaps a mind of love or a mind of compassion or the mind of ethics, then abide on that, rest on that, place your mind on that. And in this way, we both strengthen our habituation to this virtuous mind of love or compassion or ethics, but we also strengthen our mental factor of concentration. So this is how we can slowly start to develop our mind of concentration whilst alternating between analytical and placement meditation. And this can and should be done on every step in this meditation. Then we come to the final step, which is that of wisdom. And here we can reflect in the way you've heard before. See how phenomena appear, recognizing that when I investigate, I come to recognize that no phenomenon exists in the way that it appears. Whether it's objects of virtue, virtuous thoughts, or objects of non-virtue or non-virtuous thoughts, none of these exist in the way they appear. They are empty of existing in the way they appear. So too, with the meditator, the self, as well as other people. Myself and others also are empty of existing in the way they appear. Everything, whether it's virtue or non-virtue, self or other, exists merely labeled by mind. So this meditation then is an illustration on how to put our teachings into practice.
On dinigi dan jing du sine samaj na dinigi chayu jelia da gewadi da ge susugi dinigi gewa sa shebe gewa dela dene an jige je sanje demba yunri ne ba sa da range lama la sobo ane kusirin de demba sa da dinigi simjen tamje anji zemle le hidu yongwa sho sa molam ja da dinigi susugi molam gang gaje jap tudu roch and dinigi gewa sa ba dela dene 마오바 심전 탐지 니 코줄야 저 로봇제제 심전 타지 산조고바 야 조고조고 꿰투에 규르규와 쇼세비게 되니게 몰람 자와야지 징한주고 개와 오와래 오와다 몰람 니가 최고래 되네 제와데 계침부시우래 서디 오늘 계침부래 숨고르다데.
And the final step is that of dedication. So here you can combine dedication and prayer. In other words, you can recite dedication prayers as well as include your own. We're taking this vast store of merit that has been accumulated. And here one dedicates to that the Dharma of Buddha Shakyamuni continues to abide in the world. In other words, that being is cultivated in their minds. So we dedicate that the Dharma abides in the world to the long life of all spiritual teachers, both those that we have connection to, but also those that we don't have connection with, but are benefiting beings. We dedicate so that all beings can abide in peace, that their outer circumstances can become peaceful, and in particular that they develop minds of peace within. Moreover, we dedicate that we quickly become skilled in guiding others to enlightenment. So in this way we conclude with dedication and prayer.
네, 전주 semba kundu sambo 세데 몰람 슈 야첨보 슈 답고레스 지자 몰람 콩나진 몰람 야첨보 따와 요 말신 답고레스 지자 디네 사당하는 주인의 삼다도 당에 개와 강 사바데 전주 semba kundu sam보기 몰람 간스 잡아 나시 니 개와 대한 다하라 디나신지 요쇼 세지 두치네 삼다베네 저기 몰람 야첨보 주야게 되네 직 차고레스 도시는 삼당고래제다 소수게 따직 되네게 삼막야치마 담아도는 제일세 먹군도 상복이 몰람 간스다고 오아자바나시 니디야 다가라 이 세대 도시는 도시원한 자고래제래.
There are many prayers here that one can recite. Choose those that touch you. And there's the prayer also that where one dedicates in the same way that Manjushri and Manjushri and Samantabhadra dedicated. So Samantabhadra was a remarkable bodhisattva who dedicated in extensive ways. So here, just by reciting that prayer and holding the meaning in mind, and it's one that we will recite in a few minutes together, we dedicate in the same way that this great and remarkable bodhisattva did.
Alright, that is the thing to get that change because sometimes that in it, 경험하지 말에 nga 쳐서 찍바래 nga 경험서 내가 캐바 가야 막 찍지게 당하디 말아주 찍바지 고월 당한데 잔다제 두고 말마다 있는 제고가 쳐서 찍바 되는 제고야 돼 나중에 다지기 친인 제비게다 딱 대신에 제 공자월 냠는 제와 냠좀 오수소사 딩한테 제디다 안 차상이야 제고야 차고라 진짜 나중에 다소서 아 차상 아니 강 툭툭 제고야디 이게 전부 차고로 받아 이나 직진에게 단테네시나 루스텐 자신한 것들에 이식이다 디워레시나 아나디고레.
So I hope from what we've presented this weekend there's been something that you can take away and apply. And when I give these teachings, I'm talking not just from a point of imparting academic knowledge, but also I'm presenting how I train myself. Because we are all the same in desiring lasting happiness. And in the same way that the text presents that students should train, I too am a student and I train my mind in this way. So when I present this as an encouragement to you to train in this way, also understand that this is how I commit to training my mind. So my hope is that you join me in this endeavor of cultivating our mind, of strengthening these minds of virtue within ourselves, and thereby easing the suffering in the world, and being of ever more help and benefit in this world. Okay. Then thank you very much. Thank you very much.